Until recently, the history of cartography had focused on a Western-centric narrative. But in Asia, different mapping traditions had flourished for over 2 millennia. It has been overshadowed by the West with its claims to scientific rigor and objectivity. Through Mapping the World exhibition, we are excited to share the lesser-known but fascinating stories behind Asian maps. The mapping traditions that reveal different worldviews and cosmologies, maps as a tool for power and administration, mapping of journeys, and the exchange of cartographic knowledge between civilizations. Modern Western concepts define maps as accurate representations of physical spaces and geographical realities. But to appreciate Asian maps, we need to understand that geographical accuracy is not the key concern in Asian cartography. Instead, political, religious, and aesthetic interests are perhaps more important. Maps exist in different formats, in ceramic ware, in cloth paintings, as works of art, or as medium for religious instruction and worship. Our first section, Worlds Apart, showcases different mapping traditions from various parts of Asia and the different visions of the world as depicted in these maps. Our perceptions of the world are to a large extent shaped by the maps that we are familiar with. Why is it that we think of the North as being on top and South at the bottom? Most probably, our mental picture of the world is based on the maps that we use. In this section, we will see diverse worldviews and visions of the world that existed as depicted in the maps. Traditional Islamic maps are oriented with the South at the top. 3 different visions of the world are presented here. This is a very stylized and schematic world map, typical of medieval Islamic maps. In the Islamic cartographic traditions, maps provide illustrations to detailed geographical writings. This map depicts regions from North Africa to India and China, with Persia at the center. Such maps are easily replicated and circulated throughout the Islamic world for the propagation of knowledge. Islamic cartography was very influenced by the Greeks, particularly the writings of the geographer Ptolemy. This world map shows clear Greek influences. The longitudes and latitudes were calculated. There are detailed and accurate depictions of many places, as the cartographer was able to consult travelers who had been to these places. So, what does the world look like in Buddhist cosmology? In this painting, it shows the Buddhist world system. Central to the Buddhist worldview is the Mount Meru, which is regarded as the center of the world. It is surrounded by 4 continents, and the continents on the south, or Jambudvipa, is the realm where humans live. This worldview clashed with a modern geographical model of a spherical world that revolves around the sun that was first introduced to Japan in the 17th century. There exist other Japanese maps that attempted to reconcile the traditional Buddhist worldview with new European geographical knowledge. For instance, in this map, the traditional Buddhist world comprising India, China, and Japan is prominently featured, while other continents, Europe, Africa, and the Americas, are scattered around the edges of the map.
Up until the 20th century, maps and mapping anticipated the expansion of indigenous and European colonial empires in Asia. Administrative maps produced by state cartographers allowed monarchs and officials to understand and administer their realms more effectively. Maps were also symbolic in nature. They conveyed ideas of power and control, and reflected the relationships between different Asian kingdoms. This is the 大清万年一统地理全图, or the complete geographical map of the everlasting unified Qing Empire. This is a revised and enlarged reprint of an all-under-heaven map of the empire, first presented to Emperor Qianlong by cartographer Huang Qianren in 1767. This map shows the extent of the Qing Empire following Qianlong's 10 great campaigns, where frontier zones such as Tibet had been pacified. The map is both symbolic and administrative, showing Qianlong's view of China and the world. This map is a very Sinocentric map. If we look closely, we can see that China dominates the heart of the map, positioning itself as the central kingdom, or Zhongguo, at the center of the world. Meanwhile, Europe and the Near East, as well as Annam, Japan and Korea, are relegated to the peripheries of this large empire. The map was produced from indigenous Chinese mapping traditions, which was used to record and communicate knowledge of Qing territories. And to the north of Beijing, we also see the Great Wall of China winding through the northern landscape of the country. The two thick lines at the heart of the map are actually the two major arteries of China. The one at the top is the Yellow River, and the one at the bottom is actually the Changjiang. On closer look, you will see many place names embedded within different shapes and sizes. These are actually the different administrative subdivisions of the empire. If Qianlong were to look at this map at that point of time, he would be able to know where exactly his provinces, his prefectures and districts are. So for example, provinces are denoted by a square with a line through it. Whereas for squares, these are prefectures. Meanwhile, the most numerous unit, which are the circles, are actually the districts that are dotted all across China. Asia was home to many religious and political capitals. The layouts of these cities were laden with symbolism, reproducing political and religious power hierarchies. By the 19th century, detailed urban surveys as well as advances in cartographic practices allowed for the creation of highly elaborate urban maps across Asia. Take this map of Beijing for example. This is the 最新北京内外首善全图, or the latest complete map of the inner and outer capital of Beijing. This map shows Beijing during the reign of Emperor Guangxi in the 19th and 20th centuries. And on closer look, we see the Forbidden City nestled at the heart of Beijing. This actually mirrors the cosmic centrality of the emperor, around which China and the rest of the world revolves. Beijing also has a very strong north-south axis that aligns with the north-south celestial poles. During this point of time, there were already foreign influence present in Beijing, as evidenced by the presence of different embassies on the street near to the imperial palace. We also see a railway as well being constructed in the thoroughfares. This map of Seoul is one of two commissioned by the French embassy in the late 19th century. It is done in the landscape painting style, with the mountains surrounding Seoul depicted in a 3/4 elevated view. This map is actually in a worm's eye view of Seoul, which means you are a worm looking out at the rest of the city from the center of Seoul. The area closest to you is shown upside down, while the furthest area is right side up, and that's to allow people to look at the map from all around it. The map depicts the mountains surrounding Seoul and prominently features Mount Namsan in the south and Mount Pugak in the north. The royal palaces and grounds, including Gyeongbok Palace and Changdeok Palace, are featured directly south of Mount Pugak. Meanwhile, 7 foreign embassies are also shown on the map, including that of the United States, France, China and Japan. From the 13th century, a boom in overland and coastal shipping routes brought merchants, explorers and more across Asia and the world. Explorers like Marco Polo and Zheng He traversed the Silk Roads and crossed the oceans, amassing in their wake a wealth of geographical knowledge that found their way into publications and cartographic documents. Itinerary maps born out of these cultural encounters became essential for land and sea navigation. From the emperor to the wanderer, these maps were also symbolic, visually charting human relationships to places of significance. On 10 September 1778, Qing Emperor Qianlong departed the Imperial Palace in Beijing on his third ever Imperial Eastern Tour to the Eastern Qing tombs. This journey, which would last for 2 months, would take him along the Great Wall of China, past Shanhai Quan, into Manchuria, where he would go to Mukden and Yongling to pay respects to the ancestors of the ruling Aising Zheluo clan. His goal? To show his filial piety to his ancestors, as well as to reaffirm the dynastic legacy of the Qing. Spanning over 6 meters in length, this detailed route book records the daily stops of Qianlong on his journey. If we have a closer look at the map, we will see that the place names in the map are actually in Manchu, which is the official language of the Qing administration. Whereas at the top and bottom parts of the map, we see the dates written in Chinese, which shows really both Qing and Chinese influences in the production of this map. For every page of this map, it represents a day's worth of journey, and we will be able to see on a specific day where Qianlong went to and potentially what he did on the day itself. The emperor's journey is denoted by a red dotted line that cuts through the center of the map. Even though the terrain in real life would not have been so smooth, this map depicts the emperor's journey as being, again, at the center of the cosmos, and the whole terrain curves to fit the emperor's journey. We also have a special feature on this map of very interesting sites and landmarks important to Qing history. So take for example, here is a depiction of Shanhai Quan, or the Mountain and Sea Pass, which is where the Great Wall of China meets the sea. It is also at Shanhai Quan where the Qing eventually entered China to conquer Ming China. There are also other important landmarks such as hunting lodges, mountain villas, as well as army encampments where the emperors would have stopped at when he visited the Eastern Qing tombs.
In the history of cartography, exchange of knowledge between civilizations had been common. The Arabs and Persians learned from the Greeks. The Portuguese explorers, Indian and Malay seafarers exchanged notes on their sea charts in the 15th and 16th centuries. Such exchanges built knowledge of world geography as we know today. The European Jesuits were active in China in the Ming and Qing dynasties. Their map-making endeavors and collaboration with their Chinese counterparts offer a fascinating example of cartographic exchange between civilizations. Let's look at some of the maps arising from these collaborations. Italian Jesuit priest Matteo Ricci published at least 4 editions of world map in China in collaboration with his Chinese associates. While his maps were based on the latest Renaissance cartographic knowledge, but his colleague Li Zhizao provided information from Chinese sources which was incorporated into the maps. This is the Japanese version of Matteo Ricci's world map. It contains information which we would take for granted as general knowledge today. But in Ming Dynasty China or Edo period Japan, it must have been mind-blowing to the audience then. Most of the continents and countries on this map are accurately depicted. However, the Europeans then still believed that there was this huge continent at the south called the Unknown Southern Land, or Magellanica, named after the Portuguese explorer Magellan. The map is like a snapshot of the world then, providing political, geographical, and socio-cultural information of various regions and countries. It describes the spices and produce in the Indonesian islands, how everything will float in the Dead Sea due to its water property, and even the cannibals in Brazil. Interestingly, the map also includes some mythical places, such as Land of Women and Land of Dwarfs, but these are described as past histories of certain places. In the 18th century, Qing Emperor Kangxi commissioned the French Jesuits to conduct the first ever scientific and comprehensive survey of China and produced an atlas of the empire. The Jesuits worked in collaboration with their Chinese colleagues and produced 41 regional maps of the Qing territories. The resulting atlas is called the Huangyu Quanlan Tu, or Kangxi Atlas. Information from the Kangxi Atlas spread to Europe because of the Jesuits. The maps and the geographical data on China were translated into European languages and published. This encyclopedic publication had a great impact on European understanding and perspectives on China.
Through our Mapping the World exhibition, we are excited to tell the stories behind Asian maps, of the mapping traditions which reveal the worldviews and cosmologies of different cultures, of mapping as an instrument of power and administration, as well as the exchange of cartographic knowledge between cultures of East and West. There's so much more to see here at the Mapping the World exhibition at the National Library, where we feature over 60 cartographic treasures from all across the world. Do join us here at the library today and learn more about the rich and wonderful histories of Asian cartography.